Hey, hi, hello, how you doing? Today I am going to be talking about how to edit your first draft. A lot of people who get the idea to write a book actually stop after writing the first draft. They never actually get into editing for a variety of reasons. But a big reason for that would be that they just don't know where to start. And I get it, editing seems incredibly scary and it seems really complicated, which in some ways it is. But if you know what you are doing, if you have a little bit of guidelines when you first go into the editing process, you can make it a lot less hard and a lot less daunting on yourself before you even properly go into it. There are ways to set yourself up for success when it comes to editing your book and making it the best that it can be. So today I'm going to take you through my personal process of how I edit my books from start to finish. Please don't feel the need to copy this to the letter. Just take from it what you find useful, anything that you think could help your process, and leave the rest be. Also, before we get into the video, I need to apologize for not uploading these last 2 weeks. I had a bit of a medical emergency, and if you can't tell from my face, which is looking a little bit rough today, I am still recovering from that. So I very simply could not film. Each and every time that I talked, it sent me into a massive flare-up, so I could not film. So it just wasn't possible for me to do that. Still recovering, as you can see from my face. But we're back. We're good now. Videos are back each and every week, don't you worry. And yeah, let's just get back into the video. So this first step is something that I only personally do when I finish the first draft of my book, when I have first written the story down. Some people like to do this step after each draft that they have edited because it helps them to stay organized and more on top of what they want to edit. I personally don't find that is needed, and that is rereading your first draft. Now, as I said, not everybody does this each and every draft. Some people do prefer it because it helps them stay on top of where their book is at in the editing process and how close it is to the final product that they are looking for. I personally only do it after the first draft, just because the first draft is really bad, and you're only gonna get a picture of how bad it truly is once you have reread that first draft, because that's when you will be able to make a list of all of those gosh darn plot holes, those storylines that you abandoned midway through, all of the characters that probably shouldn't be there, the unnamed side character that is kind of important, but apparently it wasn't important enough for your brain to give him an actual name, and the pieces of world building that seemed really cool at the time, and now that you read it back, it is highly unnecessary and just cringy all the way through. These are things that you need to know about before you go in and edit, which is why that first read through is quite important. I personally hate doing it because I do not like reading my own work, okay? I hate reading my own work, but it is genuinely a very important piece of the writing process, of the editing process, because it is the only way to get a truly comprehensive picture of where your book is at compared to where you want it to be. Whilst you are drafting, you may already get some sense of this I like, this I don't like, this I probably will bring back, this is probably something that I will drop, but not as comprehensive as when you actually sit down with your manuscript and read it front to back. Now, there are multiple ways to go about this. Some people, like me, I just do it on my laptop just because my books tend to be quite long and I don't want to have to print out 400 pages of a manuscript just to read it and then throw it away. So I like to do it on my laptop. However, while I edit in Scrivener, I like to reread it in a program like Word or Pages. The reason for that is because it is a lot easier, in my personal opinion, to annotate and make notes when it is in a program like Word or Pages compared to Scrivener. I like to highlight certain sections that I don't like or really truly have a problem with right off the bat, as well as take notes of anything that I think could be helpful when I go in and edit my draft. Now, this could be anything. This could be problems that I notice right off the bat, ideas that I have, although when they are longer ideas, I would rather write them down on a piece of paper in a notebook, which I always have a notebook on hand when I am anywhere in the editing process. I personally find it very helpful. This includes when I am rereading the first draft, just to write down any bigger ideas that I have or things that I want to work out. Things that are more about the book in general rather than the current scene that I'm reading or the last line that I read in my manuscript. If it is more of an overall idea, it usually goes into a bigger notebook. I do also like to make note of just the things that I do like about the manuscript, not just the things that I don't like. I read my manuscript from my reader's perspective, and a reader would pick up on both the things that they do like about the novel and things that they don't like about the novel. So if something is good, I do point it out to myself just to, when I am editing, also give myself a little bit of a boost. Now, how detailed you go about this is up to you. I like to write notes about each chapter. I like to have a separate document, or I like to do it in a notebook, just depending on what I'm feeling, where I write down a bit of a summary of what happens in each chapter, as well as the things that I liked and the things that I didn't like, along with some comments in the actual document. Now, when I go in and edit it, I don't follow this to the letter. It's more so just a guidelines and a summary of my initial thoughts that I can just choose to work with in the editing process or just choose not to work with. Some people like to make it a little more complicated by having multiple colored highlighters, multiple colored pens, and assigning a meaning to each and every one of them. I don't personally do it that complicated, because then I find myself reading the book from a writer's perspective rather than a reader's perspective. And I do think that it is important to go in, read your book from the reader's perspective, from your target audience's perspective. And I find that when I have 5 different colored pens, 9 different colored highlighters, and each and every single one of them have a different meaning, that just doesn't work for me. I tend to then, in my head, immediately overcomplicate it. But if you are somebody who wants that bit more organization, it is definitely something that you can do. And there is a creator on here, Abby Emmons. She's really popular. Absolutely love her videos. She has a video on rereading that first draft and just the first draft in general, where she really explains her process of going back and rereading that first draft. She is somebody who uses a ton of highlighters and different pens and so on and so forth. So if that is something that you would like to hear about, I'll see if I can find the video and link it in the video description box. So once you have reread your draft, you have a comprehensive list of everything that you want to change. It can seem very overwhelming with everything that you now know needs to change. And going in and editing your book, trying to fix everything at once, I promise you, is not going to work. It's going to lead to you being completely overwhelmed, missing a ton of things, and it's just not going to work. So what I like to do is to pick out 3 things from the big list of things that I want to edit, and mainly focus on those 3. Now, before I pick those 3 things out, I like to personally organize this list of everything that I want to change into categories from biggest problem to the smallest problem. So the big problems would be things that have to do with world building, plot, characters. So the main issues for me usually are things that would extend throughout the entire book, right? Problems that are not isolated to a single chapter or a single scene. So those would be things like things to do with your plot, things to do with your world building, the foundation of your novel. So whether that be an overcomplicated plot line or 3-4 plot holes that you found along the way. Maybe your world building is just way too complicated all over the board. Maybe the world building is really hard to follow. There are just way too many details. Or maybe on the other end of that, the world building is very, very flat when the story is told in a world that is supposed to be very rich and have a lot of story to tell on its own. Those are the things that you're going to want to focus on first because they are the foundation for your story. Your characters can only function the way that they should in the world when the world itself is actually quite solid because your characters react to their environment just like we humans do on a daily basis. We are influenced by our circumstances and by our environment. So before you can really think about making your characters the best that it can be, their surroundings have to be at least close to somewhat decent. They have to have a solid foundation before you can think about any of those things. Do they have to be perfect? No, absolutely not. But the basis has to be consistent, it has to be clear, and you as the writer have to know I'm not going to make any more major changes to this. And it's solid, it's good, it's something that I can work with. So these will be the things that you want to pick out first amongst that list and focus on in editing that first draft, so in draft 2. The rest of that list, it's not like you're not going to be looking at those things. Most writers, at least. I get that there are some writers out there who won't focus on any of those. For me personally, I do tend to focus a little bit on them, but more so in the background. I will, if I come across a scene where I notice, the characters here are a little flat, but there's also a major problem with the plot, I will immediately drop any of those character problems to later when I will first fix this plot issue, because that is what I have decided to work on mainly this draft. Now, does that mean that if I come across a scene or a chapter where the main issues are the characters and really the plot is fine, that I will skip that chapter entirely? No. Some people might. I personally don't, just because otherwise I find myself getting a little bit confused as to where my characters are supposed to be in their character growth and the like, and blah, and so on and so forth. So I like to work chronologically. I know a lot of people don't, which is fine, but just know you can focus on the other problems as well. But if they aren't in your top 3 and you come across something that is in your top 3, feel free to just put the rest to the side. It's not that important as an issue that you found that is in your top 3 of I want to work on this draft. And each draft you're going to just pick out 3 things that you still feel is an issue, again going from biggest problems to smallest. Pick that out, put that on your top 3 list, and go into your draft and edit it. Now, again, it doesn't have to be perfect at the end of the draft. The goal is that it's no longer a major problem. And from there, you can continue to work on those things a little bit more in the background, or if you feel that the plot needs a second round of pure focus from you, then that is fine. I usually focus on the plot and the world building at least as a main focus in the first 3 drafts before I start kind of letting it fall to the wayside and the characters and the like start to come up more. And I mean that when it comes to full-on books, or when it comes to novellas, when it comes to short stories and the like. Just anything that I write, I like to use this method because it makes it much more organized. It also means that you won't get overwhelmed by every single thing that you have to do. Now just go on instinct. Whatever the biggest issue is within your book, focus on that. If the plot is actually not the biggest issue, then you don't need to immediately focus on the plot when that is what everybody else is doing. Your book is unique, and so are its issues and its problems. So if instead you find that the main character is the problem and is what keeps derailing the story, focus on your main character first. Or if you find that you first need to work on your villain before you can really focus on bettering the plot and bringing in more suspense and the like, then absolutely go in. Do that first. Don't even worry about it. Even if people tell you, oh, you need to work on the plot first 100% of the time. That doesn't make sense if your plot is really not the big issue. If I am working on a car, and the engine blew up in the middle of the road, I am not going to first look at the tiny paint chips that have fallen off of the car after years of use. I'm going to focus on the engine first, right? The same goes with your book. You focus on what is the main issue first, no matter what that is. What you need as the author in order to fix your book is what you need to do. Not what a random Redditor online told you. Not even what I tell you. Seriously, any advice that people give you, no matter how many subscribers that they have or followers on TikTok, take it with a massive grain of salt. Please do. Just take what you like, leave the rest, and just figure it out from there. Just do what feels right for you, because truly it does not matter that much. Just because you don't do it the same way that somebody else does it doesn't mean that your book is bad, doesn't mean that your book won't succeed. It just means that your book is unique and different, and so are you as a person and as a writer, and you just have different needs as a writer in order to succeed than some random person on the internet that you have never met, probably will never have a single interaction with, and probably lives on the other side of the world. It is not that serious. Just take what you like, take what you think would work, and leave the rest in the garbage bin for the next person who might find those tips helpful and who might find some use out of them. So once you have done those things, it is actually time to go into your draft and start editing. Now, whether you do it chronologically or you go to the chapters first where you have noticed the problems is entirely up to you. I like to do it chronologically just for the reason that I tend to find smaller issues relating to those top 3, those big 3, in chapters that I hadn't really noticed the issues in before, now that I'm looking at everything as a writer. These small details that actually add up to those big issues, they're still important too, and you still need to work on them. So I like to go in chronologically because that is when I notice those tiny, teeny little details that are still related to those big 3 issues that I have decided to work on. If I do it out of order, I don't tend to do it. I will 100% forget a chapter somewhere, 100% forget to edit a scene somewhere. It just does not work for me. Now, you also don't immediately have to edit on your computer. This also relates to how deeply you go in with the read-through of your draft. I just like to point out the issues, right? Some people like to truly pick that draft apart from the very beginning to the point where they have all of the teeny tiny problems listed as well as solutions already foremost. So you just have to kind of go into the document and actually apply those changes. For me, I like to do that deep dive when I'm actually editing, so I don't have a solution already for each and every problem that I run into. So some people, to make a long story short, like to do their first edit on paper and then transfer those edits into their Word document or Pages or Scrivener or whatever you like to use. I use Scrivener for editing personally just because it helps me stay organized. So decide on the chapter or the scene that you want to work on and just read through it. Refresh your brain with everything that is in that scene, from the characters to where you are in the plot, and so on and so forth. You may want to, maybe take some notes again, very likely just on passages and the like that you would like to edit, or some people just also choose to not do that. I personally don't, because I'm gonna go in 2 seconds and edit it anyway. It can be very helpful to just take very slight notes on the major problems of that scene before you go in and edit, just to give you a little bit of a focus point. Now, some people like to start editing from the beginning of the scene. Some people, again, like to start with the major issues first within that scene. So start wherever in the scene or chapter where they find the biggest issue is, and go back and forth, essentially play hopscotch, going from biggest issue to smallest issue. I, again, go chronologically because otherwise I tend to get confused. This is mainly because I have massive brain fog, usually 24/7, so I will just get incredibly confused if I do it that way, but I know a lot of people who find it very helpful to do so. I like to start from the beginning and just edit as I go. It can turn into a full rewrite while you're editing. It can turn into just some very, very teeny tiny edits, but if it's draft 1, you're much more likely to have a full-on rewrite than in draft 7. Now, as you edit, you're also going to come across maybe some issues that you didn't notice before now that you're looking at the perspective from a writer, which is completely normal. That doesn't mean that you didn't do enough of a thorough read-through. It just means that now you have a very different perspective from what you had when you were doing that first read-through. It's completely normal. It's completely fine. So you're gonna also want to keep an eye out for any things that you may have missed during your first read-through that you may want to work on and edit. So that list is probably going to become longer. And it's also absolutely normal to find yourself fixing one problem but creating another smaller one. Don't worry about it. It's completely normal. We're all human here. It is normal to make mistakes. And as you are laser focused on one issue, it is not completely abnormal to find yourself creating another issue. It's nothing that you can't fix. Just don't stress yourself about it for now. It is something that you can fix later on. You can put it in your top 3 in some next draft, or you can just decide to work on it in the background while you are working on other things. It will be fine. Just don't worry about it too much. Just go in, start writing, make any changes that you wish to make, whether it be big issues or focus on more smaller things. If it stands out to you and you feel that it would be good to now make a change and edit within the document, then go for it. Even if it is something as slight as word choice, just go for it. And if you are afraid of messing up, I like to just keep a separate document that I do not touch of the last draft. I like to make a new document each and every time for each new draft. I know that some people don't. One of my friends absolutely calls me crazy for this, but you know what? It works for me. She does not understand my editing process at all, so it's fine. So when I start a new draft, I make a new document and I slowly, as I edit, copy and paste each of the chapters in the new document. This means that draft 6, the document for that, remains completely untouched. So if I am editing and I feel that I've completely messed up this scene, it is not what I want it to look like. It is really, really bad. I've created more problems than I have solved. I just go back to the document with the previous draft, pick out the scene, copy and paste it again, and just start over from scratch. This is all I have for today's video. I hope that you enjoyed it. I hope that this video was helpful. If you liked it, please don't forget to like this video, and if you want to see more of my content, please subscribe to this channel. I normally upload the videos every single week unless I have a medical emergency. So please stick around if you would like to see more videos, and then I will see you next week. Bye bye.